They pushed the quiet girl into a hole. Big mistake. She's an underground fighter. Maya Castellanos adjusted her oversized hoodie for the 100th time that morning, pulling the fabric down to cover her lean frame as she navigated the crowded hallways of Westfield High School. At 17, she stood barely 5'4", with shoulder-length black hair that she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail, and dark brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything while revealing nothing. Her olive skin bore the faintest traces of old scars along her knuckles, but they were so faded that most people never noticed them beneath the sleeves she always wore, pulled down to her wrists. She had been at Westfield for exactly 3 weeks now, ever since her father's construction company had relocated them from the rough neighborhoods of East LA to this pristine suburban community. Maya kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to, and did everything possible to remain invisible. She had learned long ago that drawing attention was dangerous, especially when you carried secrets that could change everything. The hallways of Westfield buzzed with the typical energy of a Monday morning in late September. Students clustered around lockers, laughing and gossiping about weekend parties and upcoming homecoming plans. The school itself was a sprawling modern facility, all glass and chrome, with motivational posters covering every available wall space. The main corridor stretched nearly 200 feet, lined with trophy cases, showcasing decades of academic and athletic achievements. To Maya, it felt like walking through a museum of a life she had never lived. Her first period was AP Literature with Mrs. Henderson, a kind woman in her 50s who had tried multiple times to draw Maya into class discussions. Maya always had the right answers, but she delivered them in barely audible whispers, her eyes fixed on her desk rather than meeting anyone's gaze. She understood the material better than most of her classmates, but years of keeping a low profile had made silence her default setting. The other students in her classes had quickly categorized her as the weird, quiet girl. She dressed in baggy clothes that hid her athletic build, never participated in social media drama, and ate lunch alone in the library rather than braving the social minefield of the cafeteria. Her teachers saw potential in her work, but worried about her isolation. Her guidance counselor, Mr. Parks, had already scheduled 2 meetings to discuss her adjustment challenges. What none of them knew was that Maya Castellanos had been fighting since she was 8 years old. Not the kind of fighting that happened in school hallways, but real fighting in underground rings where 15-year-olds with nothing to lose went to earn money for their families. She had started training at her Uncle Roberto's gym in East LA after her mother died, partly to stay out of trouble and partly because she had a natural talent that even veteran fighters recognized immediately. By the time she was 14, Maya was earning more money in weekend fights than her father made in a month of construction work. She fought under the name Ghost because of how quietly she moved and how quickly she could disappear after a match. She had learned to read opponents like books, to spot weaknesses in stances and breathing patterns, to end fights with devastating precision. Her record was 47 wins and 3 losses, with 32 knockouts. But that life was supposed to be behind her now. Her father had made her promise, when they moved to Westfield, that she would leave the fighting world forever, that she would focus on school and try to build a normal teenage life. Maya had agreed, partly because she was tired of the violence, and partly because she knew her father worried about her safety every time she stepped into a ring. Now, as she walked through the pristine hallways of Westfield High, Maya felt like she was wearing a costume of normalcy that didn't quite fit. Every instinct she had developed over years of fighting told her to assess threats, to note exit routes, to position herself defensively. But she forced herself to ignore those instincts, to play the role of just another quiet teenager trying to get through high school. The problem was that quiet teenagers, especially ones who kept to themselves, were natural targets for certain types of people, and Westfield High had its share of predators who thrived on finding weakness and exploiting it. Madison Cole ruled the junior class at Westfield with the kind of casual cruelty that came from never facing real consequences. At 17, she was tall and blonde, with the kind of conventional beauty that opened doors and smoothed paths. Her father owned 3 car dealerships in the area, and her mother served on the school board, which meant that Madison had learned early that rules were flexible things that bent around people like her. She surrounded herself with a carefully chosen group of followers: Jessica Torres, whose family had money but not quite enough status to feel secure; Brandon Walsh, a linebacker on the football team who enjoyed hurting people when he knew he could get away with it; and Tyler Mills, whose father was a local police officer and who had inherited both his dad's badge and his casual disregard for anyone he considered beneath him. Madison had noticed Maya during the second week of school, not because Maya stood out, but precisely because she tried so hard not to. There was something about the new girl that irritated Madison on a fundamental level. Maybe it was the way Maya never seemed to care about the social dynamics that Madison had worked so hard to control. Maybe it was how Maya's quiet confidence felt like a challenge to Madison's authority. Or maybe it was simply that Madison needed a target and Maya seemed like she wouldn't fight back. The first incident happened on a Thursday afternoon in the girls' bathroom near the gymnasium. Maya had been washing her hands when Madison and Jessica walked in, their conversation cutting off abruptly when they saw her. "Oh, look what we have here," Madison said, her voice carrying the particular tone that meant trouble was coming. "The little ghost girl." Maya kept her eyes on her hands, finishing washing them methodically. She had faced down grown men who could break her in half, but something about teenage cruelty felt more dangerous, more unpredictable. "I'm talking to you," Madison continued, stepping closer. "Where did you come from anyway? You just showed up here like some kind of refugee." "East LA," Maya said quietly, reaching for a paper towel. Madison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course you did. Let me guess, your daddy's a gardener or something? Maybe a janitor?" "Construction," Maya said, still not looking up. "Oh, how exotic. A construction worker's daughter gracing us with her presence." Madison moved to block Maya's path to the door. "You know, there are certain standards here at Westfield, certain ways people are expected to behave, to dress, to contribute to the community. I'm not sure you understand that yet." Maya finally looked up, meeting Madison's eyes for just a moment. What Madison saw there should have been a warning, but she was too used to people backing down to recognize real danger when she saw it. "I understand," Maya said simply, and moved to step around Madison. Madison grabbed her arm, not hard enough to leave a mark, but firm enough to establish dominance. "I don't think you do. See, my mother is on the school board, and my family has been in this community for 3 generations. We know how things work here, and what doesn't work is having random girls from the barrio coming in and disrupting the social order." Maya looked down at Madison's hand on her arm, and for just a second, Madison felt something cold run down her spine. There was something in Maya's eyes that didn't match her quiet demeanor, something that suggested Madison might have miscalculated. But then Maya simply pulled her arm free and walked out of the bathroom without another word, leaving Madison feeling somehow cheated of the confrontation she had been expecting. That should have been the end of it. A normal target would have been intimidated, would have started avoiding Madison, would have given her the satisfaction of submission. But Maya simply continued her routine as if nothing had happened, which only made Madison angrier. The second incident happened in the cafeteria on the following Monday. Maya sat alone at a table near the windows, reading a book while she ate her lunch. She had learned to tune out the noise around her, to create a bubble of quiet in the chaos of teenage social dynamics. Brandon Walsh appeared at her table like a storm cloud, his massive frame blocking out the light from the windows. At 6'3" and 230 pounds, He was used to people getting out of his way simply because of his size. He had been a star player since freshman year, and the combination of athletic success and family wealth had taught him that he could take whatever he wanted. "This is our table," he said, his voice carrying the casual arrogance of someone who had never been seriously challenged. Maya looked up from her book, her expression neutral. "I don't see any names on it." Brandon's face darkened. He wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not by someone who looked like they could snap in half. "I'm telling you, it's our table. We sit here every day." "There are plenty of empty tables," Maya said, gesturing around the cafeteria. The truth was, Maya had chosen this particular table precisely because it was isolated, because it offered clear sightlines to all the exits, because it positioned her back to the wall. Old habits from a different kind of life, but habits that had kept her alive more than once. Brandon leaned down, placing his hands on the table and bringing his face close to hers. Maya could smell the testosterone and aggression radiating off him, could see the small scars on his knuckles that told her he had some experience with violence, but it was amateur violence, the kind that relied on size and intimidation rather than skill. "Listen, little girl," Brandon said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a threatening whisper. "You can do this the easy way or the hard way. Move, or I'll move you." Maya closed her book carefully, marking her place with a small bookmark. When she looked up at Brandon, her expression was completely calm, almost serene. "And which way would you prefer?" For a moment, Brandon was thrown off balance. The question wasn't what he had expected. Most people either ran or tried to argue. This quiet acceptance of conflict was something new, and it made him uncertain. But uncertainty made Brandon angry, and anger made him stupid. He reached out to grab Maya's book, intending to throw it across the cafeteria as a demonstration of his power. Maya's hand moved so fast that Brandon barely saw it. One moment he was reaching for her book, and the next his wrist was caught in a grip that felt like it could snap bone. The pressure was precise, hitting nerve points that sent shooting pain up his arm and made his fingers go numb. "Let go of me," Brandon said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The pain in his wrist was unlike anything he had experienced, and Maya's grip felt immovable. "You let go," Maya said quietly. "You reached for my property." For a few seconds they stared at each other across the table. Brandon was trapped, unable to free his wrist without admitting defeat, but also unable to escalate without risking serious injury. Maya held him effortlessly, her expression never changing, her breathing steady and controlled. Finally, Maya released his wrist and picked up her book again. "I think there might be a misunderstanding about your table," she said, her voice still perfectly calm. "But I'm sure we can work it out peacefully." Brandon rubbed his wrist, feeling returning to his fingers. The whole exchange had lasted less than 30 seconds, and no one else in the cafeteria had even noticed. But Brandon felt like he had just been schooled by someone who knew things he didn't, and the feeling made him furious. He wanted to grab her, to use his size advantage, to show her what real strength looked like. But something about the way Maya had handled his wrist told him that escalating might not go the way he expected. So instead, he settled for a threat. "This isn't over," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Maya looked up from her book one more time. "I hope not," she said. "I was just starting to enjoy getting to know my new classmates." Brandon walked away, feeling like he had somehow lost a confrontation that should have been impossible to lose. The rational part of his brain told him to leave the weird girl alone, but the part of him that had been humiliated demanded revenge. That afternoon, Madison found Brandon and Tyler in the parking lot after football practice, both of them nursing bruised egos and looking for someone to blame. "She did something to my wrist," Brandon was saying, flexing his fingers and trying to work out the residual soreness. "I don't know what, but it hurt like hell." Madison listened to the story with growing interest. She had been planning her next move against Maya anyway, but the fact that the quiet girl had somehow gotten the better of Brandon changed the calculus. "So she knows some kind of martial arts or something," Madison said thoughtfully. "That's actually perfect." Tyler, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "Perfect how? She just proved she's more dangerous than we thought." Madison smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Because now we know she's been hiding something. And if she's been hiding martial arts training, what else is she hiding? Maybe we should do some digging into her background, find out exactly who Maya Castellanos really is." The investigation didn't take long. Madison's mother sat on several community boards and had access to school records that technically should have been private. Within a few days, Madison had Maya's full academic history, her previous addresses, and enough information to piece together a picture that was far more interesting than she had expected. Maya had transferred from Lincoln High in East LA, a school known more for its metal detectors than its academic achievements. Her grades were excellent, but there were concerning gaps in her attendance during her freshman and sophomore years. Her emergency contact was listed as Roberto Castellanos, who Madison's internet searching revealed was the owner of a boxing gym in a particularly rough neighborhood. But the most interesting discovery came when Madison found a 3-year-old newspaper article about a police raid on an underground fighting ring. The article mentioned several arrests, including a Roberto Castellanos who was charged with promoting illegal contests. The charges had apparently been dropped, but the connection was enough to spark Madison's imagination. So our quiet little transfer student might not be as innocent as she looks, Madison told her friends as they gathered in her bedroom that Friday night. "What do you think happens to a 17-year-old girl who grows up around underground fighting?" Jessica was the first to understand. "You think she was fighting too?" "I think our Maya has been keeping secrets," Madison said, "and I think it's time we found out what they are." The plan they developed over the next several days was elegant in its simplicity. Westfield High was undergoing a major renovation project, with construction crews working on a new science wing during after-school hours. The construction site was officially off-limits to students, but security was minimal and the barriers were easy to circumvent. Madison had noticed that Maya stayed after school on Tuesdays to work in the library, usually until around 4:30 when the building started to empty out. The construction crew finished their work by 4 and left the site unattended until the next morning. It would be easy to corner Maya near the construction zone, to create a situation where she would be forced to reveal whatever skills she was hiding. The beauty of the plan was that it would happen away from the main school building, away from cameras and witnesses. If Maya really did know how to fight, Madison wanted to see it for herself, wanted to understand exactly what kind of threat she was dealing with. And if the confrontation got out of hand, well, construction sites were dangerous places where accidents could happen. On Tuesday afternoon, Maya finished her library work and began her usual route to the student parking lot where her father would be waiting to pick her up. She had noticed Madison and her friends watching her more carefully over the past week, but she had dealt with predators before and knew that sometimes the best strategy was to wait and see what they were planning. As she walked past the construction zone, Maya felt the familiar tingle of awareness that had kept her alive in the fighting rings. Someone was following her, trying to herd her toward the barriers that surrounded the renovation site. She could have taken a different route, could have gone back into the school building, could have avoided whatever confrontation was coming, but Maya was tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of pretending to be someone she wasn't. She let them guide her toward the construction site, let them think they were in control of the situation. When Madison, Brandon, Tyler, and Jessica finally revealed themselves, stepping out from behind the equipment trailer to block her path, Maya was ready. "Well, well," Madison said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of a hunter who had cornered her prey. Look who decided to take the scenic route home." Maya stopped walking and turned to face them, her expression calm and alert. The construction site stretched out behind her, a maze of scaffolding, equipment, and partially completed walls. The ground was rough and uneven, scattered with debris and marked by several deep excavations where foundation work was still in progress. "Is there something you needed?" Maya asked, her voice carrying the same quiet tone she always used. Brandon cracked his knuckles, still nursing his wounded pride from their cafeteria encounter. "Yeah, there's something we need. We need some answers about who you really are." Maya tilted her head slightly, genuinely curious. "What do you mean?" Madison stepped forward, enjoying the moment. "We know about your uncle's gym. We know about the police raids. We know you're not just some innocent little transfer student from East LA." For the first time since arriving at Westfield, Maya felt a spike of real concern. Not for her physical safety, but for the life she had been trying to build. If they had connected her to Roberto's gym, how long before they discovered the rest of it? "I don't know what you think you know," Maya said carefully. "We think," Tyler said, speaking up for the first time, "that you've been lying to everyone about who you are. We think you're some kind of gang member or drug dealer or something worse." Maya almost laughed at how wrong they were. Gang members and drug dealers were usually the ones getting beaten up in the rings where she had fought. But she kept her expression neutral. "You think wrong," she said simply. Madison's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Prove it." "Prove what?" "Prove you're not hiding something. Prove you're just a normal student who happened to transfer here from the worst school district in LA. Madison gestured toward the construction site behind Maya. "See, we were thinking that maybe you needed to learn what happens to people who lie to us. Maybe you needed a lesson in honesty." Maya looked around at the four of them, assessing the situation with the tactical mind she had developed over years of fighting. Brandon was the obvious physical threat, but he was slow and relied too much on his size. Tyler was probably the most dangerous because he was unpredictable and clearly had anger issues. Jessica looked like she didn't really want to be there, but was too scared of Madison to leave. And Madison herself was the orchestrator, the one who would need to be dealt with first if things escalated. "What kind of lesson did you have in mind?" Maya asked. Madison smiled, and Maya realized that this had been planned from the beginning. They hadn't just cornered her randomly, they had chosen this location for a reason. "The kind that involves finding out if you're as tough as you pretend to be," Madison said. "See, I've been watching you, and you act like nothing bothers you. Like you're not afraid of anything, but I think that's just an act." "Maybe it is," Maya said. "Maybe I'm terrified right now." "Good," Brandon said, stepping closer, "because you should be." Maya felt the familiar calm settling over her, the same feeling she got in the moments before a fight began. Her breathing slowed, her muscles relaxed, and her awareness expanded to take in every detail of her surroundings. The distance to each opponent, the terrain beneath her feet, the potential weapons and obstacles around her. But she also felt something else: disappointment. She had hoped that leaving the fighting world behind meant leaving this kind of violence behind too. But apparently, violence found her wherever she went. "So, what's the plan?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about how they intended to proceed. Madison gestured toward the construction site. "The plan is simple. We're going to see what you're really made of. And if you're hiding fighting skills like we think you are, well, then everyone's going to know exactly who Maya Castellanos really is." "And if I'm not?" Madison's smile turned cruel. "Then you're going to learn a very painful lesson about what happens to people who don't fit in at Westfield High." Maya nodded slowly, as if considering her options. "I see. And there's no way to resolve this peacefully." "Too late for that," Tyler said, his hand moving to his pocket where Maya could see the outline of what was probably a knife. Maya sighed, a sound that carried years of weariness. You know, I really hoped things would be different here. Different how? Madison asked. Different in that I wouldn't have to hurt anyone. The change in Maya's voice was subtle, but unmistakable. The quiet, uncertain tone was gone, replaced by something that carried absolute confidence and the promise of violence. For the first time, Madison felt a flutter of uncertainty. You're going to hurt us. Brandon laughed, but it sounded forced. You and what army? Maya looked at him with something that might have been pity. I don't need an army. The first move came from Tyler, who pulled out a switchblade and lunged toward Maya with the clumsy aggression of someone who thought weapons made him dangerous. Maya stepped aside with fluid grace, her hand coming up to catch his wrist as he passed. The blade clattered to the ground as Tyler found himself airborne, thrown over Maya's shoulder in a perfect judo throw that sent him crashing into a pile of construction materials. Brandon charged next, his football training telling him to use his size and momentum to overwhelm his opponent. But Maya was no longer where he expected her to be. She moved like water, flowing around his attack and striking him in the solar plexus with a precise palm strike that dropped him to his knees, gasping for breath. Jessica screamed and started to run, but Madison grabbed her arm and held her in place. "Don't you dare!" Madison hissed. "This is what we came here for." Maya turned her attention to Madison, her dark eyes completely calm despite the violence that had just erupted around her. "This is what you came here for?" she asked. "To see if I could fight?" Madison's mouth was dry, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. "To see if you were lying about who you are." "I never lied," Maya said, stepping closer. "I just didn't volunteer information that wasn't relevant." Behind her, Tyler was groaning and trying to sit up, while Brandon was still struggling to breathe properly. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 15 seconds, and Maya looked like she had barely exerted herself. "You want to know who I am?" Maya continued, her voice still quiet, but carrying an edge that made Madison's skin crawl. "I'm someone who learned to fight because I had to. Someone who spent the last 3 years trying to forget how to hurt people. Someone who moved here, hoping to be normal for once in her life." Madison tried to take a step back, but her legs felt weak. You were just what? Bullying someone you thought couldn't fight back, trying to force me into a situation where I'd have to reveal skills I've been working very hard to keep hidden." Maya shook her head. "You succeeded. Congratulations." "Please," Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We're sorry. We didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't bother to know," Maya said, her attention shifting to Jessica with something like sympathy. "You just went along with this because you were afraid of what would happen if you didn't." Maya looked around at all of them, taking in Tyler's scraped and bleeding face, Brandon's continued gasping, Jessica's tears, and Madison's barely concealed terror. "Here's what's going to happen," Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You're going to leave me alone from now on, all of you. You're going to stop digging into my background, stop following me around, stop trying to force confrontations." "And if we don't?" Madison asked, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. Maya smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then you'll discover that what you just saw was me holding back." For a moment, they all stood in silence, the weight of Maya's words settling over them like a physical presence. Then Tyler tried to get to his feet, still shaky from his impact with the construction materials. "This isn't over," he mumbled, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Maya turned to look at him with something approaching amusement. "Yes, it is. Because if it's not, next time I won't be so gentle." Tyler wanted to argue, wanted to assert some kind of dominance, but the memory of how effortlessly Maya had thrown him was too fresh. Instead, he just glared at her and started limping toward the school building, Brandon had finally gotten his breathing under control and was struggling to his feet, his face red with humiliation. "You got lucky," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Did I?" Maya asked. "Would you like to test that theory?" Brandon looked at her for a long moment, seeing something in her eyes that he finally recognized as genuine danger. Without another word, he turned and followed Tyler. That left Madison and Jessica standing alone with Maya in the construction site, the setting sun casting long shadows across the debris-strewn ground. "I don't understand," Madison said, her voice smaller than before. "Why didn't you just tell us you knew how to fight? Why let us think you were weak?" Maya studied her for a moment before answering. "Because I was hoping I wouldn't need to be strong anymore. Because I thought maybe I could just be a normal teenager for once." "But you're not normal," Jessica said, wiping her eyes. What are you?" Maya sighed, suddenly looking older than her 17 years. "I'm someone who's been fighting since I was 8 years old. Someone who's won more fights than you can imagine, against people who would terrify you just by walking into a room. Someone who's been trying very hard to leave that life behind." Madison felt something cold settling in her stomach. "The underground fighting rings, you were actually part of them." "I was the best part of them," Maya said simply. "And now, because you couldn't leave well enough alone, that's going to come out. My father is going to find out that I broke my promise to him. The school is going to find out that their quiet transfer student has a record in illegal fighting circuits. Everything I've been trying to build here is going to fall apart." The regret in Maya's voice was genuine, and for the first time, Madison felt truly guilty about what she had started. "We won't tell anyone," she said quickly. "We'll keep it secret." Maya looked at her with something approaching pity. "You think this stays secret? Tyler just pulled a knife on me. Brandon tried to tackle me. You think they're going to keep quiet about getting beaten up by someone half their size?" Madison realized she was right. By tomorrow, the story would be all over school, growing and changing with each telling until Maya's secret would be impossible to contain. "I'm sorry," Madison said, and meant it. "I really am. We thought—" "You thought I was weak," Maya finished. "You thought I was an easy target. You thought you could push me around because I was quiet and kept to myself." "Yes," Madison admitted. Maya nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I wanted you to think. Because weak people don't get challenged to fights. Weak people don't get recruited by people who run illegal fighting rings. Weak people get to go to school and worry about normal things like homework and college applications. But you're not weak," Jessica said. "No," Maya agreed. "I'm not. And now everyone's going to know that." Maya started walking toward the school building, leaving Madison and Jessica standing in the construction site. But then she stopped and turned back. "For what it's worth," she said, "I really was hoping things could be different here. I was hoping I could just be Maya, the quiet girl who reads books and does her homework and doesn't hurt people." "You still can be," Madison said desperately. "We won't—" "Yes, you will," Maya interrupted, "because that's who you are. You're people who can't resist poking at things, who can't leave mysteries alone, who need to feel powerful by making other people feel small." Maya looked at them both for a long moment, memorizing their faces. "But here's something you should remember. I held back today. What you saw was me trying not to hurt you. If you ever come at me again, if you ever threaten me or try to force another confrontation, you'll see what I'm really capable of. And trust me, you don't want that." With that, Maya turned and walked away, leaving Madison and Jessica alone with the wreckage of their plan and the growing realization that they had badly miscalculated everything about their target. But Maya's prediction about the story spreading proved to be only partially correct. When Tyler and Brandon returned to school the next day, they did indeed tell people about the confrontation. but their versions of events were so wildly different and so obviously colored by wounded pride that most students dismissed their stories as fabrications. Tyler claimed he had been jumped by multiple attackers. Brandon insisted that Maya had used some kind of weapon. Neither of them could explain how a 5'4" girl had managed to overpower them so completely, and their inability to provide a coherent narrative made their classmates skeptical. Madison, meanwhile, said nothing. She went through the motions of her normal routine, but something fundamental had changed in her worldview. For the first time in her life, she had encountered someone who was genuinely more powerful than her, someone who could have destroyed her, but chose not to. Maya returned to school on Wednesday morning, expecting to find her secret exposed, her carefully constructed anonymity shattered. Instead, she found that most people seemed unaware that anything had happened. A few students gave her curious looks, having heard fragments of Tyler and Brandon's contradictory stories, but no one seemed to take the rumors seriously. Her first period teacher, Mrs. Henderson, noticed that Maya seemed more relaxed than usual, more willing to make eye contact and participate in discussions. During lunch, Maya found herself sitting at the same table she had claimed from Brandon, but this time no one challenged her presence there. The real test came during fifth period, when Maya walked into her chemistry class to find Madison already seated at their shared lab table. Madison looked up as Maya approached, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "I kept my word," Madison said quietly. "I haven't told anyone what really happened." Maya set her backpack down and pulled out her notebook. "Thank you." "I wanted to ask you something," Madison continued, her voice uncertain. "When you said you held back, how much were you holding back?" Maya looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Enough that you're still able to ask that question." The simple honesty of the response sent a chill down Madison's spine. She had thought she understood power, had thought that social status and family wealth were the ultimate forms of influence. But sitting next to Maya, she realized she had been playing children's games while Maya operated on an entirely different level. "I'm going to leave you alone," Madison said. "I'm going to tell the others to leave you alone too." "I appreciate that," Maya said. "But you should know that I'm not going to be hiding anymore. What happened yesterday? It reminded me that I can't run away from who I am." Madison wasn't sure what that meant, but something in Maya's tone suggested that the quiet, invisible girl she had been targeting was gone forever. Over the next few weeks, the change in Maya became more apparent to anyone paying attention. She still dressed simply and kept to herself, but there was a new confidence in her movements, a new directness in her gaze. She no longer flinched when people spoke to her loudly or suddenly. She no longer went out of her way to avoid crowded hallways or social situations. In her classes, Maya began participating more actively in discussions, revealing an intelligence and depth of knowledge that surprised her teachers. She volunteered to give a presentation in her history class about the socio-economic factors that contributed to urban violence, drawing on personal experiences she didn't fully explain, but that gave her analysis and authenticity that impressed even Mr. Davidson, the most demanding teacher in the school. During lunch, other students began joining Maya at her table, drawn by her calm presence and the sense that she was someone worth knowing. She discovered that she actually enjoyed conversations about books, movies, and the typical concerns of teenage life, when they weren't overshadowed by the need to hide her background. Maya even joined the school's martial arts club, which met twice a week after school to practice various fighting disciplines. The club was small and informal, led by Mr. Kim, a Korean War veteran who taught a mixture of techniques he had learned during his military service. Maya's skills were so far beyond the other students that Mr. Kim quickly asked her to help with instruction, a role she accepted with quiet enthusiasm. It was during one of these after-school sessions that Maya's past finally caught up with her in a way she hadn't expected. She was demonstrating a basic throw to a group of freshman students when she noticed a familiar figure standing in the gymnasium doorway. Roberto Castellanos was 53 years old, built like a boxer who had stayed in shape long after his fighting days ended, with graying hair and the kind of scars that told stories about a hard life lived honestly. Maya's hands went still on her practice partner, and the entire room seemed to freeze as uncle and niece regarded each other across 20 feet of polished floor. "Maya," Roberto said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and concern. "I've been looking for you." The other students sensed the tension in the room and began gathering their equipment, sensing that this was a private moment. Mr. Kim ushered them out with quiet efficiency, leaving Maya and Roberto alone in the gymnasium. "How did you find me?" Maya asked, though she wasn't really surprised. Roberto had connections throughout Southern California, and if he wanted to find someone, he usually could. "Your father called me," Roberto said, stepping into the room. "He was worried because you've been different since the move, more like your old self. He was afraid you were getting back into fighting." Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been trying not to fight. That was the whole point of coming here." "But you did fight," Roberto said. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded. "Some kids at school decided to test me. I tried to avoid it, but they cornered me at a construction site and one of them pulled a knife." Roberto's expression darkened. "Are you hurt?" "No, but I had to show them enough to make them back off, and now everything's different." Roberto walked closer, studying his niece with the experienced eye of someone who had trained fighters for 30 years. "Different how?" Maya gestured around the empty gymnasium. "I'm teaching martial arts now. I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not." "And that's a bad thing?" Maya looked at him in surprise. "Isn't it? I promised Papa I would leave the fighting world behind. I promised I would be normal." Roberto was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "Maya, you are many things, but normal was never one of them. And trying to deny who you are, that's not healthy for anyone, but especially not for someone with your gifts." "My gifts got me into a lot of trouble," Maya pointed out. "Your gifts also kept you alive and put food on your family's table when we needed it most," Roberto countered. "The trouble came from the world you were fighting in, not from the fighting itself." Maya sank down onto a weight bench, suddenly looking very young. "I don't know how to be both things. I don't know how to use what I learned in the underground rings and still be a normal high school student." Roberto sat down beside her. "Who says you have to choose? You think the only options are hiding your abilities or fighting for money in illegal rings? What else is there?" Roberto smiled, and for the first time since he had arrived, the expression was completely warm. "There's teaching. There's using what you know to help other people defend themselves. There's competing in legitimate tournaments. There's a whole world of martial arts that has nothing to do with underground fighting." Maya looked around the gymnasium, taking in the practice mats and equipment, the trophies from various competitions, the motivational posters about discipline and respect. "Mr. Kim has been talking about regional tournaments. He thinks I could compete at the state level." "Mr. Kim is probably right," Roberto said. "But more than that, you could help other people learn what you know. You could teach them to protect themselves, to have confidence, to understand that strength doesn't have to be used for violence." "You think I should stay here? Keep doing this?" Roberto stood up and extended his hand to help Maya to her feet. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy and keeps you healthy. But I also think you've been given gifts that are too valuable to waste by pretending they don't exist." Maya took his hand and stood up, feeling some of the tension she had been carrying for weeks finally starting to release. "Papa's going to be angry when he finds out I fought again." "Your father loves you," and wants you to be safe, Roberto said. But he also wants you to be yourself. And this, he gestured around the gymnasium, this looks like a version of yourself that you can live with. That evening, Maya sat in her family's small apartment and told her father everything that had happened since the move to Westfield. She told him about the bullying, about the confrontation at the construction site, about her decision to join the martial arts club and start teaching other students. Carlos Castellanos listened without interruption, his expressions cycling through concern, anger, and finally something that might have been pride. "I was afraid this would happen," he said when Maya finished her story. "I was afraid that moving here wouldn't be enough to keep you away from violence." "The violence found me, Papa," Maya said. "I didn't go looking for it." Carlos nodded slowly. "Your uncle said the same thing when he called. He said that hiding from who you are was making you unhappy. I was trying to keep my promise to you." Carlos reached across the small kitchen table and took his daughter's hand. "The promise I wanted was that you would be safe and find a good life. If fighting is part of who you are, then maybe the answer isn't to stop fighting. Maybe the answer is to find better reasons to fight." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. "You're not angry?" "I'm angry at the kids who cornered you with a knife," Carlos said. "I'm angry at the school for not protecting you. But I'm not angry at you for defending yourself, and I'm not angry at you for using your gifts to help other people. So I can keep teaching? I can compete in tournaments?" Carlos smiled, and Maya realized she had inherited her calm strength from him. "You can do whatever makes you happy, Mija, as long as you remember that your strength is a gift, not a weapon." The next few months at Westfield High passed more peacefully than Maya had dared to hope. Madison and her friends kept their distance, having learned a lesson about choosing their targets more carefully. Tyler had transferred to a private school across town, claiming he needed a better academic environment. But Maya suspected his parents had been told about the knife incident and decided a change of scenery was necessary. Brandon remained at Westfield, but seemed to go out of his way to avoid Maya, which suited her fine. She occasionally caught him watching her in the hallways, but his expression was more thoughtful than hostile, as if he was still trying to figure out how their confrontation had gone so wrong for him. Maya's role in the martial arts club grew beyond anything Mr. Kim had originally envisioned. Word spread about the quiet girl who could demonstrate techniques with professional precision, and students from other schools began asking permission to attend their sessions. Maya found herself teaching everything from basic self-defense to advanced grappling techniques, adapting her knowledge from the underground fighting world to help teenagers build confidence and physical fitness. The transformation in her students was remarkable. Jessica Torres, who had been part of Madison's group during the construction site incident, joined the club as a way of apologizing for her role in the confrontation. Under Maya's patient instruction, Jessica developed not just physical skills, but a sense of personal strength that allowed her to stand up to Madison when necessary. Several other students who had been targets of bullying found their way to the club, drawn by Maya's reputation for helping people defend themselves. Maya discovered that teaching defensive techniques to students who had been victimized gave her a sense of purpose that pure fighting had never provided. "You're different when you teach," Mr. Kim observed one afternoon as they cleaned up the gymnasium after practice. "More patient than I would have expected from someone with your background." Maya folded a practice mat and added it to the stack against the wall. "What do you know about my background?" Mr. Kim smiled. "I know you didn't learn those techniques in a traditional dojo. I know you've had experience with real violence, not just sport fighting. And I know that you understand the difference between fighting to win and fighting to survive." Maya stopped what she was doing and looked at him more carefully. "And that doesn't bother you? Should it? You use your knowledge to help students build confidence and protect themselves. You emphasize control and restraint, You teach them that fighting should be a last resort, not a first option. Mr. Kim shrugged. Frankly, you're exactly the kind of instructor I wish I'd had when I was learning. Even though I learned to fight in illegal competitions. Mr. Kim's expression grew more serious. Maya, I've seen a lot of young people over the years who had to grow up too fast, who had to learn hard lessons about survival before they should have. What matters isn't where you learned your skills. What matters is what you choose to do with them now. Maya felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. For the first time since arriving at Westfield, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The feeling was reinforced a few weeks later when Maya received an unexpected visitor during lunch period. She was sitting at her usual table, helping a freshman student with homework, when Madison approached with obvious reluctance. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Madison asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. Maya looked up from the math problem she had been explaining. "Sure." Madison sat down across from her, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I wanted to ask you something about self-defense." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Self-defense?" Madison's face flushed slightly. "There's this guy I've been dating, college guy, and lately he's been getting aggressive when I don't want to do things he wants to do." Maya felt a familiar cold anger settle in her stomach. "Aggressive how?" "Grabbing me when I try to leave, pushing me against walls. Yesterday he twisted my arm when I told him I didn't want to go to his apartment." Madison's voice was barely above a whisper. "I know I don't have any right to ask you for help after what I did, but I don't know who else to talk to." Maya studied Madison's face, seeing genuine fear beneath the embarrassment. "Have you told your parents?" Madison laughed bitterly. "My parents think he's perfect. His family has money. He's pre-law at USC. He's everything they want from me. They wouldn't believe me if I told them he was hurting me." Maya was quiet for a moment, thinking, what about the police? And tell them what? That my boyfriend grabbed my arm, that he's pushy about sex. They'd probably tell me to break up with him and call it a day. Maya nodded, understanding the problem. "So you want to learn to defend yourself." "I want to learn enough to make him think twice about putting his hands on me when I don't want him to," Madison said. "I know I don't deserve your help, but everyone deserves the right to protect themselves," Maya interrupted. "When do you want to start?" Madison blinked in surprise. "You'll teach me?" "I'll teach you," Maya confirmed. "But not just self-defense. I'll teach you confidence, awareness, how to de-escalate situations before they become physical. And I'll teach you how to hurt someone badly enough that they'll never want to hurt you again." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Maya said. "Wait until you see how hard the training is." Maya began meeting with Madison 3 times a week after regular martial arts club sessions, working with her in the empty gymnasium while the rest of the school was involved in other activities. Madison proved to be a surprisingly dedicated student, willing to endure bruises and exhaustion in order to develop the skills she needed. "The key to self-defense isn't strength," Maya explained during one of their sessions, demonstrating how to break free from a wrist grab. "It's surprise, speed, and targeting vulnerable areas. Your boyfriend expects you to be helpless because that's how you've been acting. When you show him you're not helpless anymore, that changes everything." Madison practiced the technique until she could execute it smoothly, her confidence growing with each repetition. "What if he gets angry when I fight back? What if he escalates?" Maya's expression grew cold. "Then you escalate faster and harder than he does. You make it clear that hurting you will cost him more than he's willing to pay. Have you ever had to do that? Escalate, I mean." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, more times than I like to think about. In the fighting rings. And outside them, when you grow up in certain neighborhoods, when you carry yourself a certain way, people test you. They want to see if you're really as dangerous as you seem, or if it's just an act. Madison stopped practicing and looked at Maya with curiosity. And what did they find out? Maya smiled, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. They found out it wasn't an act. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the gymnasium door opening. Both girls turned to see Mr. Parks, the guidance counselor, entering with a concerned expression. "Maya, I need to speak with you," he said, his tone suggesting the conversation wouldn't be pleasant. Maya and Madison exchanged glances, and Maya nodded toward the exit. "We'll finish this tomorrow," she told Madison, who gathered her things and left quickly. When they were alone, Mr. Parks sat down on a bench and gestured for Maya to join him. "I've been hearing some interesting stories about you lately." Maya sat down, but remained alert. "What kind of stories?" "Stories about fight training that goes beyond what we normally see in high school martial arts programs. Stories about techniques that seem more suited to professional competition than student self-defense." Maya chose her words carefully. "I have more experience than most students." "That's what I'm trying to understand," Mr. Parks said. "Your academic records show some significant gaps in attendance at your previous school. Your emergency contacts include a boxing gym owner who has some interesting connections to the professional fighting world. And now, I'm hearing that you're teaching techniques that are raising questions among parents." Maya felt the familiar tension of being cornered, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Are parents complaining about the martial arts program?" "Not complaining exactly, but asking questions. Questions about where you learned what you're teaching and whether it's appropriate for a high school setting." Maya looked around the gymnasium, taking in the equipment and mats that had become such an important part of her new life. "Mr. Parks, are you asking me to stop teaching? I'm asking you to help me understand your background so I can answer the questions that are being asked. Because if I can't provide satisfactory answers, there are people who think the program should be suspended until we can verify that all our instructors have appropriate credentials." Maya felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. "What kind of credentials?" "Formal training certificates, documentation of where and how you learned your techniques, proof that your methods are consistent with approved educational standards." Maya almost laughed at the absurdity of it. How could she provide documentation for skills learned in underground fighting rings? How could she explain that her techniques were effective precisely because they weren't limited by the rules and restrictions of sanctioned competitions? "I see," she said finally. Mr. Parks leaned forward, his expression sympathetic. "Maya, I'm not trying to cause problems for you. From everything I've seen, you're a positive influence on other students. But I need to be able to answer questions about your qualifications, especially if parents are going to start demanding investigations." Maya stood up, suddenly feeling very tired. "I understand, Mr. Parks. I'll think about what you've said." "Maya, wait," Mr. Parks called as she headed toward the door. "This doesn't have to end the program. If you could just provide some documentation, or maybe arrange for a certified instructor to supervise." "I'll think about it," Maya repeated, and left the gymnasium. That evening, Maya sat in her room and tried to figure out how to explain the situation to her father without worrying him unnecessarily. The truth was that she had no formal certifications, no documentation of her training, no way to prove her qualifications that wouldn't expose her connection to the underground fighting world. She was still wrestling with the problem when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Roberto's number, which surprised her since he rarely called during the week. "Uncle Roberto." "Maya, I just got an interesting phone call from someone at your school," Roberto said without preamble. "A guidance counselor named Parks." Maya's heart sank. "He called you?" "He wanted to verify your training background. He seemed to think I might have records of formal instruction, certificates, that kind of thing. What did you tell him?" Roberto was quiet for a moment. I told him the truth, that you've been training at my gym since you were 8 years old, that you've worked with some of the best instructors on the West Coast, and that your skills are at a professional level. Did you tell him about the underground rings? I told him that you've competed in various venues over the years, some more formal than others. I didn't go into details he didn't need to know. Maya felt a little of the tension leave her shoulders. And what did he say? He said he needed documentation, official records, certificates from recognized organizations, proof that your training meets educational standards. Which we don't have. Which we don't have, Roberto confirmed. But Maya, that doesn't mean we can't get them. Maya sat up straighter. What do you mean? I mean that there are ways to legitimize your skills without exposing your complete history. There are certification programs for martial arts instructors, tournaments where you could demonstrate your abilities in sanctioned competitions, organizations that could formally recognize your knowledge. But that would take time, Maya said. And Mr. Parks made it sound like the questions are happening now. Then maybe it's time to consider other options. Maya felt her stomach drop. Other options? There's a community college about an hour from where you live that has an excellent martial arts program. They're always looking for qualified instructors, and they have relationships with several universities that offer sports science and kinesiology programs. Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing what Roberto was suggesting. You think I should leave Westfield? I think you should consider whether Westfield is the right place for someone with your talents and background. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to find an environment that's better suited to who you are. After hanging up with Roberto, Maya sat in her room and thought about everything that had led her to this point. The bullying that had forced her to reveal her skills, the friendships she had built through teaching martial arts, the sense of purpose she had found in helping other students develop confidence and self-defense skills. She thought about Madison, who was just beginning to develop the confidence to stand up to her abusive boyfriend. About Jessica, who had transformed from a follower into someone who could stand up for herself. About the dozen other students who looked forward to martial arts club sessions and had found strength they never knew they possessed. The next morning, Maya made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of going to her first period class, she went directly to Mr. Parks' office and asked to speak with him privately. Maya, Mr. Parks said, looking relieved, I'm glad you came to see me. Have you given thought to what we discussed yesterday? I have, Maya said, settling into the chair across from his desk, and I think you should know some things about my background that might help you answer the questions you're getting. Mr. Parks leaned forward, his expression attentive. I'm listening. Maya took a deep breath and began to tell him a carefully edited version of her story. She explained that she had grown up in a rough neighborhood where self-defense skills were necessary for survival. She told him about Roberto's gym and the intensive training she had received from professional fighters. She mentioned that she had competed in various tournaments and exhibitions, gaining experience that went far beyond typical teenage martial arts training. What she didn't mention were the illegal fighting rings, the money she had earned, or the specific violence she had both witnessed and participated in. But she told him enough to explain why her skills were so advanced and why her teaching methods were so effective. I understand why parents might have questions, Maya concluded. My background is unusual for a high school student, but I can provide character references from my uncle and other instructors who have worked with me, and if the school needs me to pursue formal certifications, I'm willing to do that. Mr. Parks was quiet for a long moment, processing what Maya had told him. Maya, what you've described is actually quite impressive. The problem isn't your qualifications, it's the lack of formal documentation. So what would you need to satisfy the concerns that are being raised? Mr. Parks pulled out a notepad and began writing. A letter of recommendation from your uncle's gym detailing your training history, a skills assessment from a certified martial arts instructor, and ideally, enrollment in a certification program that would give you official credentials as a self-defense instructor. Maya nodded. I can arrange all of that. There's one other thing, Mr. Park said, his expression growing more serious. Some of the questions I've been getting aren't just about your qualifications. They're about the intensity of what you're teaching. Some parents feel that their children are learning techniques that are too advanced, too potentially dangerous. Maya felt a familiar frustration. Mr. Parks, the whole point of self-defense is that it's effective when you need it. Teaching techniques that don't work in real situations isn't helping anyone. I understand that, but we also have to consider liability issues, insurance concerns, the possibility that students might misuse what they learn. Maya was quiet for a moment, thinking about all the students she had worked with, their growing confidence and sense of empowerment. What if we structured things differently? What if we focused more on awareness and de-escalation, with physical techniques only as a last resort? That might address some of the concerns, Mr. Parks admitted. But Maya, I have to ask, have any of your students been involved in physical confrontations where they've used what you taught them? Maya thought about Madison's situation with her boyfriend, about Jessica's newfound ability to stand up to bullies, about several other students who had mentioned using their training to avoid or diffuse potentially dangerous situations. Not in the way you're probably thinking, she said carefully. But yes, some students have been able to use what they learned to protect themselves or avoid confrontations. Mr. Parks made another note. And in those situations, were there any injuries? Any complaints from other students or parents? Maya shook her head. The whole point of what I teach is to end situations quickly and safely. My students understand that physical techniques are only used when there's no other option. All right, Mr. Parks said, closing his notepad. Here's what I propose. You get me the documentation we discussed, the letter from your uncle, the skills assessment, enrollment in a certification program. In the meantime, you continue with the martial arts club, but we modify the curriculum to emphasize non-violent conflict resolution and basic self-defense only. Advanced techniques are put on hold until we can address the concerns that have been raised. Maya felt disappointed, but recognized that this was probably the best compromise she could hope for. How long would this arrangement last? Until you complete your certification program, and we can demonstrate to concerned parents that you have official credentials. Probably the rest of this school year at minimum. Maya nodded slowly. And what happens if I can't satisfy the requirements? Or if parents continue to have concerns even after I get certified? Mr. Parks looked uncomfortable. Then we would have to consider whether the program can continue in its current form. Maya left Mr. Parks' office feeling frustrated but determined. She spent the rest of the day thinking about her options and making phone calls during lunch and study periods. By the end of the school day, she had arranged for Roberto to provide a detailed letter about her training history, scheduled a skills assessment with a certified instructor in Los Angeles, and researched several certification programs that she could complete while finishing high school. That afternoon's martial arts club session was subdued as Maya explained the new restrictions on what she could teach. Several students expressed disappointment, and Maya could see the confusion in their eyes as they tried to understand why parents would object to learning effective self-defense techniques. It's not fair, Jessica said after most of the other students had left. You've helped so many people here. Why are they trying to stop you? Maya finished putting away the practice equipment before answering. Because people fear what they don't understand, and my background is hard for some people to understand. Madison, who had stayed behind to help clean up, spoke up. Is it because of what happened with us? With the construction site? Maya looked at her in surprise. What do you mean? I mean, did Tyler or Brandon's parents find out what really happened and start asking questions? Because if this is happening because we forced you into that confrontation... Maya had wondered the same thing but hadn't wanted to make assumptions. I don't know. It's possible. Madison's face flushed with anger, but this time it was directed at herself rather than at Maya. This is my fault. All of it. If we hadn't cornered you, if we hadn't forced you to fight, none of this would be happening. You don't know that, Maya said. And it doesn't matter now anyway. What matters is figuring out how to move forward. What if we told people the truth? Jessica suggested. What if we explained that you only fought because you were defending yourself? Maya shook her head. That would just create more questions about why I was able to defend myself so effectively. And it might make things worse for all of you. But we could tell them that Tyler had a knife, Madison said. We could explain that you were just protecting yourself from someone who was trying to hurt you. Maya considered this for a moment. Madison, why are you so concerned about this? You could just walk away from the whole situation. Let the program get cancelled. Let me deal with the consequences. Why do you care what happens to me? Madison was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focused on the floor. Because you saved my life. What? The self-defense training. Last weekend, when my boyfriend tried to force himself on me. I used what you taught me, and I got away from him. Madison's voice was barely above a whisper. Lee, if you hadn't been teaching me, if I hadn't learned how to break free from a grab, I don't know what would have happened. Maya felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. Are you okay? I'm okay, and I broke up with him, and I'm never going to let anyone make me feel helpless again. Madison looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. That's because of you, because of what you taught me. So yes, I care what happens to you, and I care what happens to this program. Jessica nodded emphatically. She's right. You've helped all of us. We're not going to just stand by and let people ruin this for you. Maya looked at both girls, seeing a determination that reminded her of herself at their age. What are you thinking? Madison straightened up, and Maya could see echoes of the confident, commanding person she had been before their confrontation. I'm thinking that maybe it's time for the people you've helped to start speaking up for you. Over the next several days, Maya watched with amazement as Madison organized a campaign to support the martial arts program. She spoke to parents, wrote letters to the school board, and arranged for students to share their positive experiences with school administrators. Jessica documented the program's impact on student confidence and safety, creating a presentation that she delivered to the Parent-Teacher Association. Other students wrote testimonials about how the martial arts club had helped them deal with bullying, build self-esteem, and develop leadership skills. Maya's favorite moment came when she overheard Brandon Walsh talking to a group of football players in the hallway. Look, I don't know what your parents are worried about, Brandon was saying. Maya knows what she's doing, and if your kid is getting bullied, wouldn't you rather they knew how to defend themselves? Since when do you care about the martial arts program? One of the other players asked. Brandon was quiet for a moment. Since I learned that there's a difference between being strong and being tough. Maya taught me that, even though she probably doesn't realize it. Maya continued walking, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but she felt a warm satisfaction at the evidence that even her former opponents had learned something from their interactions. The certification process proved to be easier than Maya had expected. The skills assessment with the instructor in Los Angeles was completed in a single afternoon, with the examiner noting that Maya's abilities were well beyond anything typically seen in teenage students. The certification program itself could be completed online with periodic practical demonstrations, meaning Maya could work toward her credentials without interfering with her high school schedule. Roberto's letter to the school was a masterpiece of carefully worded truth that painted Maya as a prodigy who had trained with some of the best instructors on the West Coast without mentioning the specific venues where that training had taken place. Maya has demonstrated exceptional dedication to the martial arts since childhood, the letter read. Her technical skills, teaching ability, and understanding of conflict resolution are at a professional level. I have worked with hundreds of students over 3 decades, and I have rarely encountered someone with her combination of physical ability and emotional maturity. 3 weeks after her meeting with Mr. Parks, Maya was called back to his office for a follow-up conversation. This time, his expression was much more relaxed. "Well, Maya, I have to say that the response to our inquiries has been impressive," he said, gesturing to a folder full of documents on his desk. "Your certification instructor gave you the highest rating he's ever assigned to a student. Your uncle's letter is extremely compelling, and the student and parent testimonials we've received have been overwhelmingly positive." Maya felt cautiously optimistic. "Does this mean the program can continue?" "Not only can it continue, but we've had requests from other schools in the district to share your curriculum. The school board is considering expanding the program district-wide." Maya blinked in surprise. "Really? Really? It seems that what you've been doing here has attracted attention for all the right reasons. The combination of practical self-defense, conflict resolution, and character building is exactly what a lot of parents have been looking for." Maya felt a surge of excitement mixed with trepidation. What would that mean? District-wide expansion? Mr. Parks leaned back in his chair. It would mean more students, more responsibility, and probably the need for additional certified instructors. It would also mean more scrutiny, more formal structure, and the need to document everything you do very carefully. Maya thought about this for a moment. "And it would mean legitimizing everything I've been teaching here." "Exactly. Maya, you've built something here that has real value. The question is whether you want to take it to the next level." Maya left Mr. Park's office with her head spinning from the possibilities. A district-wide program would mean teaching hundreds of students, training other instructors, developing formal curricula. It would mean taking her knowledge from the underground fighting world and transforming it into something that could help young people throughout the area. That evening, she called Roberto to discuss the opportunity. "It sounds like exactly what I hoped would happen when you started teaching," Roberto said. "You found a way to use your gifts that helps people and gives you a legitimate career path. But it also means committing to staying here, to building something long-term. I always thought this was temporary, that eventually I'd move on to something else." Roberto was quiet for a moment. "Maya, do you remember why you started fighting in the first place?" Maya thought back to her 8-year-old self, angry and grieving after her mother's death, looking for a way to feel strong and in control. "I was angry. I wanted to feel powerful." "And why did you keep fighting?" "Because I was good at it. Because we needed the money. Because it was the only way I knew how to contribute to the family." "And now? Why are you teaching?" Maya considered the question seriously. "Because I like helping people become stronger. Because I can see the difference it makes in their lives. Because it feels like I'm using everything I learned for something positive." "Then you have your answer," Roberto said. "The question isn't whether you should commit to this opportunity. The question is whether you're ready to transform everything you learned in the underground world into something that can help people for years to come." Maya spent the next few days observing her students with new eyes, imagining what it would mean to develop their training into a formal program that could reach hundreds or thousands of young people. She watched Jessica demonstrate a defensive technique to a new student with patience and precision. She saw Madison stand up to a group of seniors who were hassling a freshman, using presence and confidence rather than aggression to diffuse the situation. She noticed how Brandon had started attending sessions occasionally, not to learn fighting techniques, but to help spot younger students during strength training. She observed how the entire social dynamic of the school had shifted slightly, with students who had been targets of bullying walking with more confidence, and students who had been bullies finding more constructive ways to assert their status. On Friday afternoon, Maya made her decision. She found Mr. Parks in his office and knocked on his open door. "Maya, come in. Have you given thought to the district expansion opportunity?" Maya sat down and looked at him directly. "I'm interested. What would be the next steps?" Mr. Parks smiled broadly. "The next step is a presentation to the district school board next month. You'd need to demonstrate your teaching methods, present your curriculum, and answer questions about implementation and oversight. And if they approve the expansion, then you'd spend the rest of this school year developing a formal program structure, training additional instructors, and preparing for a district-wide launch next fall." Maya nodded slowly. "Mr. Parks, I want you to know that I understand what this means. It means taking full responsibility for every aspect of the program, making sure every student is safe, ensuring that what I teach is used responsibly. It also means that your background will probably be scrutinized more closely than it has been so far," Mr. Parks warned. "Are you prepared for that?" Maya thought about everything she had been through to get to this point. The underground fights, the violence, the move to Westfield, the bullying, the gradual process of learning to use her skills for something positive. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm prepared for that." Mr. Parks made a note in his calendar. "Then let's start preparing for your presentation. And Maya, I think you should know that I've never seen a student program have this kind of positive impact. Whatever happens with the district expansion, you should be proud of what you've accomplished here." Maya left the meeting feeling like she was standing at the edge of a new life, one where her past would become the foundation for a future she was only beginning to imagine. She thought about all the students she might be able to help, all the young people who could benefit from learning not just how to defend themselves physically, but how to carry themselves with confidence and resolve conflicts without violence. As she walked through the hallways of Westfield High, Maya realized that she was no longer the quiet, hidden girl who had arrived 3 months earlier. But she also wasn't the underground fighter she had been in East LA. She was something new, something that combined the strength of her past with the possibilities of her future. For the first time since leaving Roberto's gym, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And the best part was that she was just getting started.